recording now. The topic of this talk today is the power of the mind. And in Buddhism, the word Buddhism, of course, comes from Buddha, and Buddha means the enlightened one, the fully enlightened one, or the fully awake one, or the fully aware one. And so it's when we learn from someone who is fully aware, then that is the Buddha. And what the Buddha wants to teach us is for all of us to also become a Buddha, to all of us, so that all of us can also become fully awake and fully aware. So when we look at the words, we can already know Buddhism is about awareness. And awareness, when we look at the word in general usage, we can have a very superficial definition. We are aware of the things going on around us, of the news, of what people are doing, and so on. That is a kind of very superficial worldly awareness. But in Buddhism, it goes deeper and deeper, and that digs deep into our mind. And the Buddha with his practice, has realized the highest state of awareness that any being can achieve. And the Buddha also realized that this mind of awareness, that this is the highest that exists, that this is everything, that this mind is the source of the whole world. That is powerful. And the Buddha also realized that not only he alone has this powerful mind, but every one of us, we all have it. We all have the same potential of the same mind as a Buddha, as someone who is fully aware. And that is a very good news. So that means that we all have the potential to have the power over our own world. And the Buddha wants us to use this tool to realize this mind. And we in Buddhism, we also call that the ultimate state, or we call that Buddha nature, or we call that the pure mind or the true mind. All these are different words for the same thing. And this thing is actually beyond words. It's beyond any description, it's beyond any philosophy, it's beyond any calculation. And so even the Buddha, when he talked about it, he can only use words as tools. And in Buddhism, we often say the words, the Buddha's teaching, is just like the finger pointing to the moon. So, of course, when we want to see the moon, that is our goal, then we need to know the direction. The sky is very vast, and when we have no clue, we can search everywhere and we don't see it. But when we have someone who saw the moon before us and can point it to us, then we can follow the direction of the finger and find the moon. But we have to find it ourselves. The other person who has already found it, that's his job, but he can only help us to point in the direction, and we have to see it for ourselves. And so all the Buddha's teachings, they are just the finger, but the finger is very important. Without the finger, we won't find it. But the teaching itself is not the moon. So we only use the teachings so we can access this powerful mind of ours. And on the Buddhist path, that's what it's all about. And that is very exciting. That is very inspiring, because as we go along with the practice, as we follow the direction to the moon, that means we follow what the Buddha is teaching us step by step. And we, by that, in that process, we go deeper and deeper and make our own experiences. And then we can already, although we don't know what the moon actually is like, we can already experience that there is something. There must be something very powerful. And how do we know? I think we all have some experiences, and all already in science. Now we know that the mind is very powerful. The mind is not only what we use for thinking, for feeling, and all these. Of course, that is also mind. Everything is mind. But what we are talking about here is not the thinking mind, but the underlying ground of being, and that is the substance of our mind. And the mind is, we can say, it's like it has an essence. The essence is formless, cannot be grasped, and is very calm, has no thought. The essence is very pure, no thought, no movement, just like water, like a clear mountain lake. It has no ripples, and the water is very clear. So you can see to the ground, and the water can also reflect everything, the mountains, the trees, and everything very clearly without distortion. But the water can also have a function. And so the water can, for example, carry a boat. The water can be water for drinking. The water can produce, or can be rain, can be snow. So the water has all different kinds of functions. But still the essence, it is water. And so the same with our mind. Our mind has this essence of clarity, of stillness, of motionlessness, and the mind has functions. So the mind can think, and from the thoughts, everything we do starts with a tiny little thought, a tiny motivation. Usually we don't even notice it. It just pops up, and then very quickly it goes on and we say something. So the thought becomes speech, or the thought becomes an action. Anything we do, like from making our tea, to going to work, starting the car, all these actions, they start with a thought. And most of the time, we are not aware of this process because our mind is too coarse. We don't see what is going on, all these little sequences of thoughts. But every thought that is generated, that creates something. And so there in Buddhism, Buddha teaches us the law of cause and effect. So whatever we start with a thought is a cause, and that cause has some effect. And the effect may come immediately, or it may come with a time lapse. And how long the time lapse is, that depends on other conditions. But every cause has an effect. And when the cause and effect, it starts with the mind, but it gets transmitted to the material life. So when we have, for example, now we sit here, we watch this Dharma lecture, and it started with your motivation. You got the information, and then you thought, oh, that's interesting. I want to join. So it started with a motivation, a thought, and now it materialized that you are sitting here right now listening to this talk. So everything starts with a thought, and when the conditions are ripe, then it materializes in some kind of form, either a physical form or other mental forms. So maybe one thought gives rise to some idea or rise to emotions, and so on and so on. So at the base is always our mind. And we already know that the mind can do much more than what we usually think. For example, when we think about the medical studies, we know already there is the placebo effect. That means our mind can influence our physical form of our physical body, and that is recognized. And so when we have a certain, for example, the placebo effect, you take some medication and you are told this pill is, for example, helping against your stomach ache, and you take it and you are confident that it will help your stomach ache. You take it and your stomach ache will disappear. And later on, it shows that there was only sugar in that pill. The pill didn't have any medication. So how come your stomach ache disappeared? Because of the mind. Because your mind was directed to the function of the pill relieving your stomach ache. You were confident that this is going to happen. You just made it happen in your mind. So when we think about it, this is maybe just a small thing, but in a lot of situations of our life, it happens this way. When our mind, especially when our mind is one-pointed, very strong on one topic, then that topic can manifest. So that means when we are very strong, for example, we are very confident about something, for example, we have a driving test and we are naturally confident that we will pass the test. Then we go into the test and the probability that we pass is very high. But if we go on the other hand, we go into the driving test and we always tell ourselves, I'm going to fail, something is happening, this is not going to work, then the probability that the outcome is not good is also very high. So I think most of us, we can relate to this because we can directly see it. And probably most of us have experienced it to some degree. And if we see this more and more, we can see when the mind is very focused on a topic, then the power of the mind is very strong. And so when we meditate, our mind becomes more calm, and then we can focus our thoughts more directly, more consciously on certain things. For example, my teacher, the Grandmaster Weijue, he had this wish, the vow to build a huge monastery to provide a space for everyone who wants to practice, no matter whether a monastic or a lay practitioner. But he had no money, he had nothing. And still, he had this idea, this vow, and then he worked on it. It's not just you sit there and think, oh, I want to have 1,000,000, and then 1,000,000 will fall from the sky. It doesn't work like that. But if you are positive, if you have a wholesome vow, you want to do something and you work on it. That means every day, you renew your vow, your mind is very clear about it. And then naturally, the conditions will arrange itself. So Grandmaster started with this vow, and now in 2001, this big, huge monastery was opened. And it's amazing, from zero. And people told him, oh, this is too big, and you have to be realistic, and it's not going to work. And he was just confident. He trusted the Dharma. He followed his vow. And this is possible. It happened. But of course, most of the times our mind is very scattered. So I'm sure you know the example of when you take a magnifying glass and in the bright sunshine, you hold it on a piece of paper, and then the sunlight focuses the light on one spot, and then when you wait long enough, then you will see the piece of paper will start to smoke and catch fire. And that happens because the magnifying glass focused the sunlight. If the light is diffused and just ordinary sunlight, then you put out a paper there in the sun and it will not suddenly start to burn from nothing. So our mind normally is scattered. We have all kinds of thoughts, random thoughts, all the time. And when we want to stop our thoughts, we sit here and we say, okay, now I just want to think nothing. Try it now. Try to just think nothing. I'm sure after less than a second, when you observe yourself well, you see there's already thoughts coming in. When we are not trained, it's not possible to just think nothing, because our mind is used to thinking all the time, all the time, all the time. And we can imagine in 1 hour how many thoughts there are. In 1 day, how many thoughts? So all these thoughts, they are usually very scattered. And we are not aware of most of the thoughts. And also some of the thoughts have already become habits. We have certain patterns of thinking, of reacting, and so it just goes automatic. And so in 1 day, we create a lot of things, but we are not aware of it. But when the mind is focused, then we keep the thought on one topic. And then something happens because the mind is focused. So the mind has the same power, but the power is diluted by the scattering of our thoughts. So and then in the law of cause and effect, and the law of cause and effect applied to our person, that is what we call karma. So in karma means we have an action of body, speech, or mind, so a movement, and that movement is creating a cause, and the cause is a cause, and the cause is creating an effect with a time lapse, and the effect will come back to us. So that is cause and effect with reference to our person. So everything we do, everything we think matters and influences ourselves. So that means when we are most of the time not aware of our thoughts and we just randomly have thoughts, we randomly talk, we randomly do things, then we are creating a lot of causes and we are not aware. And then, of course, the effect will come at some point, and with the time lapse, we don't even recognize what was the cause because we just see the result. And then, of course, there's pleasant results and then there's unpleasant results. And when there's unpleasant results, we all go, oh no, how could this happen to me? And that's unfair. And it's someone else's fault. And it's my parents' faults, my partner's faults, my co-workers' faults, my boss's fault, society's fault, and also and so on. So when something happens that is unpleasant, that makes us suffer, then we look at the cause outside of us. But when something pleasant is happening, we think, oh, that's nice. I want to enjoy it. I want to have more of that. But we don't know exactly how to get more. We just want the result, but we don't know what is the cause for it. And so, and a lot of time, we actually, in theory, we have the key to our good luck. We have the key to a wholesome life, but we don't use the key. We don't have access to the key. We just live our lives according to our habits, and we create all the time. We create things with our minds every day, every moment. And this process is very strong. And when we want to practice, we can learn to start changing in ourselves. We can start becoming more aware. And then when we become aware, we can see more clearly. We can generate some wisdom. And the wisdom here is to see what kind of cause leads to what kind of effect, what kind of results. So if I see that more and more clearly, then it's only logical that if I want to have wholesome or pleasant results, then I have to create wholesome or pleasant causes. And then I can diligently dedicate myself to do that, to live in that way. And that's one positive aspect of Buddha's teaching, of the practice of the Dharma, that we learn to cultivate that wisdom and to understand what are the wholesome causes and what are unwholesome causes. And then we need to focus our mind to become more calm, to become more in control of our mind. Otherwise, when we want something, we do something, but our habit of being distracted is so strong that it undermines our goals. And that's where meditation comes in. We meditate to, on the one hand, to calm our mind, to learn to go back to the mind that is not moving. That is very difficult, but we can start to first have a focus. For example, we start with the breath meditation, awareness of breathing. Just focus on our in and out breath. And by doing that, we gradually train our mind to do the things that we wanted to do and not to just randomly think of this and that all the time. But now it's time for meditation. We focus on our breath, breathe in and out, feel the air flow in and out. And Whenever the mind wanders off, we bring it back. Bring it back to the breath. We don't let it ramp around. We bring it back. And that's the way how we train our mind. We tame our mind, not to just do what it wants, like a wild monkey, jumping from one tree to the next. And if we want to gain the power over our mind, we need to first tame the mind. And then we learn, we need, that is calmness of the mind, and then we need clarity. Clarity, that is wisdom, to see more clearly, to become more and more aware. And this awareness that, of course, on the one hand, awareness is inside of us. It's already there. But we are so defiled, our mind is so defiled by all our thoughts, our habits, that this natural clarity cannot show itself. In Buddhism, we also say our true mind is by nature pure. There are no defilements in our true mind, in our pure awareness. But because we always have these random thoughts, we have these random actions, and our mind is likened to, we say, the mani pearl. The mani pearl is a clear crystal pearl that is transparent, very clear, very shiny, and that can reflect everything around. When the pearl is put on a red piece of cloth, the pearl seems to be red. When it's on a blue cloth, the pearl seems to be blue. That is the function. A pearl can take on any color, but the pearl itself has no color. And this mani pearl is the pearl of our pure mind, of our wisdom. But right now, this pearl is buried in mud. So the shininess of the pearl cannot manifest. So we just have this lump of mud. And we just think, oh, this is just a lump of mud. What should I care about it? But we know that there is a treasure, and we just need to remove the mud. And inside the mud, there is this pearl which has never been defiled, because it doesn't mix with the mud. The pearl is always the pearl, but it cannot work as a pearl when it's inside the mud. So first of all, if we want to access this power of the pearl, we need to remove the mud. And in order to remove the mud, we need to understand what is the mud. And there is the Buddha's teaching. Buddha is sharing with us. And this mud is all this mud in our mind. There's our greed. Greed here is not only, I'm so greedy, I want a lot of money, or I want to eat a lot, but every liking, every wanting, every desire counts in Buddhism as greed. And then there's the opposite. There's hatred or anger. And hatred or anger is not getting very upset about something. Of course, that too. But even a little disliking, a little impatience, all that counts as in the category of anger. And that is also mud. And so these things, then there is ignorance, the ignorance of not seeing clearly, what am I? Who am I? Not seeing clearly what is the principle of causality. All that is ignorance. That's also a kind of mud. And then there's the mud of the self. we think this person, this physical body, the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts, the concepts, the consciousness, we think all this is me. That is my person. We think that very naturally. We are born with that thought. But that thought, the Buddha teaches us, is also a wrong thought. We are not like that. And that's a very big mistake that we all have, we are born with. And the Buddha and also other enlightened people, they can dissolve that mistake in our thinking and then become free. And so this thinking of I am this person, this is myself, that's also a mud. And that mud obstructs the wisdom and the power of the Mani Pearl, obstructs the power of the mind. So when we want to access this power, the step is to work on removing the mud. So we can, on the one hand, we adjust our thinking, we adjust our actions, our speech in a way that we see clearly what is wholesome, what is a pure way of being. And that starts with very obvious things and goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And in that process, we grow more and more of our awareness. For example, the Buddha teaches us wholesome ways of lives, pure ways of life. And there comes the Buddhist ethics. I don't want to go into the details here now, the ethics, but when we are not following the ethics, we basically follow the patterns of greed, anger, and ego and ignorance. So, and this way, we always create new trouble for ourselves. And we don't access the pure power of the mind. So when we live a pure way of life, according to the ethics, then at least from first from the coarse environment of our living, we more and more adjust, resonate with a pure lifestyle, and a pure lifestyle resonates with a pure mind, and that resonates with our own Buddha nature. So that's a gradual process of purifying ourselves. And then we become more and more in accord with the natural purity of our mind. And then gradually we can make more positive experiences. We can access this power of mind even more. And of course, in Buddhism, it's not only why do we want to access the power of the mind. It's not just to get what we want. If we only want, that's also greed. So maybe we can learn to some extent how we can use that mind in a positive way to live more happily, but that's not yet the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to ultimately be one with that pure mind, be one with that clarity, and be free from all the mud. And then naturally, there is no more want. Because we learn to be free, to be content. We see that all these things, these outer things, they are also just manifestations of our mind, and they are not real. So why would we want to go after not real things? There's no point. But when we become clear, when we become very aware, we can use the mind and ourselves It's like in a play. We play, we do the best to our understanding what we can do with this lifetime. We can, when our mind is pure, very naturally, there are other qualities in the mind. There's the quality of compassion. There's the quality of wisdom. There's the quality of happiness. And with compassion, we see that so many other beings, humans, animals, and others, they are suffering. And when we have the power, we can dedicate our lives to help them suffer less and help them to also access their power, their key to their own liberation, to ultimate happiness. And that's what the goal is. Ultimate happiness, not conditioned by outer things, not conditioned by material things, not conditioned by other people, by situations, nothing. The mind is just mind. The mind is naturally pure, calm, and in a state of calm happiness. And that's what it's all about. That's where we want to go. And we can start, everyone, with some steps to make some adjustments in our lives. To first of all become one, well, there's so many things we can do with Buddhist practice. Of course, there's many entries, and the longer we walk on this path, the more those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, they come together and form a complete picture. And it doesn't matter with which piece we start. We just put one and one together, and then we get a small cluster. And then we see more and more clearly. We have our experience. And then when we see we have experience, we become motivated and we trust that there is a bigger picture, that we can make it, we can achieve. And so one way is to, of course, follow the Buddhist ethics, to live a wholesome way of life. The other way is to start meditation practice, to calm our mind, to tame our mind, and then also to become more in control of our mind. And another part is to start to actively generate more wholesome thoughts, to become aware of our patterns, observe ourselves. Observing ourselves is a very key practice on the Buddhist path, to always introspect into our actions, speech, and our thoughts, and see whether this, what I'm doing right now, is this in accordance with someone who is enlightened like a Buddha? Is this in accordance with a wholesome, pure lifestyle? And if not, then to adjust it. Little by little, we adjust ourselves. And then we will see changes. For example, some people, they always see everything in the negative. They always, every time they complain, they are never happy, and there's always something wrong. When they are in a group of people, they always find something wrong with someone, and then they focus always on what is wrong. And this kind of thinking, this person, you can imagine, this kind of person is not a happy person. So in that case, the practice would be to observe one's own thought, and first of all, to see one's own patterns without judging, just seeing, and that's awareness. And from seeing, then seeing the consequences. Oh yes, there is my negative thought again. And then do something, change the thought, stop the thought, and actively create positive thoughts, starting to praise people or train oneself to look at the good things of the situation. So everyone is different, of course, but for people with this habit, that can be very helpful. And that's a practice that takes long, not only 1 or 2 days, but to really get into a new way of thinking. And so, and when that happens, when the person can manage that, the person will notice some changes in their lives. Suddenly, some more positive things will happen. Suddenly, people will come up. Suddenly, some causes will just appear. And that is all starting in the mind. So we should really be very aware of what is going on in our mind. And when we understand more about causality and karma, that's also a very big topic of the Buddha's teaching. And a lot also has to do with the mind. So when we do something and we think that is normal, and in fact, we just do a casual thing, we laugh at someone who is maybe has just had some bad luck. And this short laugh creates maybe a karmic situation where we experience also some bad things. And so everything we do matters. Everything has an influence on our own future lives, sooner or later. So there are so many ways we can start to train our mind and, of course, our actions to change our way of living. And then, with every little change, we can make some positive experience. And there we can access more and more the power of the mind, the power to change our own world. Actually, the Buddha teaches the outside and inside. This is a kind of duality that is in our thinking mind. But ultimately, everything, the whole world, all people, all beings are part of our own mind. So there is no you and me, the other and me. That's a duality. So when we come closer, deeper, deeper in the mind, this ultimate mind is beyond all duality. And then when we reach that state of mind beyond duality, then everything is there. Then we have the key to everything. And we are liberated, and that is great. So Buddhism has a lot to offer, and it all starts in the mind. And of course, the mind translates into our thoughts and into our actions. So that's for now. And I hope that was inspiring, and I can only say I still find the way very inspiring, and there's layers and layers more to discover about the mind.
Goodness. Thank you, Venerable Shifu. That was a life-enhancing lecture.
Can you stop the recording, please?